Today I'm going to show you how I make white basmati rice in my Instant Pot. Hi, I'm Aaliyah Millam. I'm the author of Prep Ahead Meals from Scratch. And in this cookbook, I do share 4 different ways to batch cook rice. I have a stovetop method, an oven method, a slow cooker, and a pressure cooker method. But what I found is, since using the Instant Pot, is that it doesn't let off as much steam as a traditional pressure cooker. And so I've had to reduce the amount of water I use. Now, a lot of people use, when they're cooking in their Instant Pot, they use a ratio of 1:1 for rice to water. And I found that I don't quite like that either. So what I've done is I use a ratio of 1 to 1.25. So I use 1 cup of rice, 1 1/4 cup of water. Now, I never cook just 1 cup of rice though, because I want a big batch that I can put some in the fridge for later in the week, and I can put some in the freezer just for those busy nights when I just need to be able to grab something that's pre-cooked and I don't want to go to packaged foods. So I'm going to show you how I batch cook this using 3 cups of white basmati rice. Now, let's take off the lid. And if you have a rack in here, remove that. We only use that when we're cooking meat in there. So if you have gotten your basmati rice from a bulk food section, you're going to want to rinse it before you put it in. And I have rinsed mine. If you packaged rice, often comes pre-rinsed. But the first thing I do is I add 2 tablespoons, not 2 cups, 2 tablespoons of olive oil. And that will help keep the rice from sticking to the bottom of the pot. It doesn't always happen. Sometimes I leave the oil out, and it still comes out. But I find that it just helps just a tiny bit to add that olive oil. And I'm going to add the 3 cups of rice. And we got those all in there. Now, since I use the ratio of 1 cup to 1 1/4 cup, I have 3 3/4 cup of water. I'm going to pour that right over the top, and just going to make sure all the rice is covered. And that's all. You can put in some salt, you can put in some pepper, you can put in some spices. I'm not going to. One of the reasons I like to batch cook rice though is because once it's out, I'll add seasonings or I'll add it to recipes. So having plain cooked rice on hand makes it so much more flexible for me than to have a certain flavor established. Okay. So once we put the lid on, we want to make sure it's to sealing. And then you might have a rice button. If you click that rice button, it's going to have you cook it for way too long. So what I usually do is I choose manual, and then I make sure that it's on high pressure, and then I'm going to turn the time down to 3 minutes. And once it's at 3 minutes, it's just going to, in a second, click to on. I'm going to let it cook at high pressure for 3 minutes. Okay, so it says it's on. So while it's cooking at high pressure for 3 minutes, what I'm going to do at the end of that 3 minutes when it's done is I'm going to do a slow release method, which actually means we don't do anything, but we're going to time it. We only want it to do the slow release for 7 minutes. Now, so it's 3 minutes of a high pressure cooking and 7 minutes of slow release. So it's a total of 10 minutes of cooking time. But we do have to remember, anytime you're working with an Instant Pot or a pressure cooker, it's going to take a couple minutes before it gets to high pressure. So the timing on this won't start until it gets to high pressure. So just factor that in. Even though I'm telling you the cooking time is only 10 minutes, it's not going to officially start the cooking time until it gets to high pressure. Okay, so I'm going to turn off the camera for 3 minutes because I'm assuming you don't want to stare at me for 3 minutes. And I will come back and I'll show you, once it's done cooking at high pressure for 3 minutes, what I do for the 7-minute slow release method. So this is almost done cooking at 3 minutes at high pressure there we go. Okay, so now if you see on the front of my Instant Pot, it moved to low, right? And so it moved to low and it's starting to count right there. So what that means is that is the slow release method. It is no longer cooking at high pressure. It on its own just went to low and it is doing the slow release method, and we are just going to leave it there for 7 minutes. When that hits 7 minutes, if there's any other steam that's still in there, we're going to go ahead and do the quick release method, and I'll show you that when it gets to that point. While it was cooking, I went ahead and pulled out my containers because I'm going to show you what I do with all this batch cooked rice after it's done. So as you can see, it's at the 6-minute mark. It's almost at the 7-minute mark, and just went to 7 minutes. So we're going to do the quick release method for the rest of the steam, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to push it to venting. Some of the steam has been coming out. That's why it's not as, if we had done the quick release earlier, it would have just been tons of steam. It's not quite as much. Okay, so we almost have all of the steam out now. And we can also turn it to off. And that just clicked. Did you hear that? That means it's safe to open. And if there's any hot water in there, I just let it go back down in there. Now, I don't know if you can hear it, but I have a fan going off, and that's so I can have an overhead camera. And I just want you to see how just fork tender this rice is. So all we're going to do is just fluff it really quick. And once it's all fluffed, then I am ready to start putting it in containers. So what I'm going to do first is these are my husband's lunches for the week, and I am going to put in a half a cup of rice, or approximately, I'm not going to worry about it being exact, into each container. And one more. Okay, now for these rices, whoops, this one doesn't want to come out. So for these, what I'm going to do is I made a batch of the Mongolian broccoli and beef from my cookbook, Prep Ahead Breakfast and Lunches. And so I'm going to put a serving on top of each one of these rices, and then I'm going to put the lids, and then I have lunch for the week for my husband. Fortunately, my husband's the type of guy who, if he likes a recipe, he can eat it every day for lunch. But if you're not the kind of person who likes to eat the same thing for lunch, at least with my Mongolian beef and broccoli with this rice, it freezes really well. So I could still make a batch and then only pull out 1 or 2 for 1 week and then have 1 or 2 for the other week and alternate them with other things. Now what I do with the rest of this is I put it in these containers. It's a 2-cup container, and I'm going to fill them up and I'm going to freeze them, and that way I have rice on hand for any meals that I need. Now I'm going to leave the lids off because I want these to cool a little bit before they go into the freezer. Let's see, that's more rice than was needed. If I put it in the freezer just like this while it's really hot, all of that steam is going to make ice crystals, and I don't want that. So I'm going to let it cool for a little while until the steam is all released. Now, if it's going into the refrigerator, it's not going to hurt it. I just threw rice around the kitchen. And so if it's going into the refrigerator, the steam being released is not going to bother it at all, and you can go ahead and do it. It's just going to keep it moist in the refrigerator. And we're almost, I'm going to grab the pot holder. I'm going to have a little bit more than, let's see if I can get this. I like to leave a little bit of room in case they're going to expand. Well, not in case they expand, because we know they're going to expand. So I like to, in anything that's going into the freezer, even though it's a 2-cup container, I'll only put about 1 3/4 cups of rice in there because we know it's going to expand. Okay, so you can see why I like to cook at least 3 cups of basmati rice at one time in the Instant Pot. I have 5 lunches. I have enough for 4 dinners. One of these is going to go in the refrigerator where it can last in the refrigerator for 3 to 4 days. If I'm not going to use it within 4 days, I put it in the freezer. These all 3, I'm going to let the steam cool, make sure it's all gone, and then I'll put the lids on and I'll put them in the freezer, and they can remain frozen for up to 3 months in the freezer. I always use it before 3 months though, because it's just so convenient to have pre-made rice ready to go in your freezer, and it can thaw really quickly. You can either take off the lid and put it in the microwave and thaw it for a couple minutes in the microwave, or what I like to do is I like to just put it into a bowl of lukewarm to cool water, and it will thaw very quickly in water. If I'm adding it to a soup, I'll just add it frozen and just let the heat of the soup go ahead and thaw it for me. Subscribe to this YouTube channel for more quick and easy cooking tips.